morning to the honorable ministers of the council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and respective radio stations island-wide. I'm Rolika Roach and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, January 8th, 2020. At this time, I invite the Minister of Finance and Acting Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Artwell Edion, to address you.
Good morning to the Prime Minister. Good morning to the media. Good morning, St. Martin. I'd first like to start off by saying Happy New Year, happy and healthy New Year to the people of St. Martin. And I hope that you have a prosperous decade, since it's a decade, the 2020, the year of vision. Wish you all the best for the next decade. I'd first like to address you in the capacity of Minister of Finance. Three major improvements have been defined for the Ministry of Finance. Advices for the improvements were submitted in several reports of the accountant, SOAB, and the CFT, and funds were reserved in the budget 2019. Because of issues with the financing, the initiatives could not start. In the meantime, a new government was sworn in. This government would like to take the opportunity to confirm the design course. To get more clarity about the plans, government envisions a small summit with relevant entities to review, and if desirable, adjust the plan's approach. The summit will address three improvement areas. Upgrade the financial management function as a whole. This includes modernizing the existing but overage ICT solutions used for the financial registration. The second area is the tax organization. So we want to modernize the process of ICT, the tools, the skill development, the client orientation, communication, and actually all that is needed to create a smooth service-oriented and professional organization. 3, directly related to the improving the tax organization is the third area, which is the modernization of the tax legislation. Challenging is the approach of this area in relation to the second one. For example, do you start acquiring a dedicated ICT system to support the process first and revamp the legislation after? Or do you change the order and start with the revamping of the legislation before selecting the software? Choices will influence the efficiency. Considering the complex relationships that have to be managed during the improvement initiatives, an in-depth expertise in these areas are critical. Since St. Martin is a member of CARTAC, contact was made by the director of the tax department to become familiarized with the organization and establish a willingness and ability of CARTAC to support St. Martin. An initial request equipped with the background information has been submitted to CARTAC. Response is pending. For the Ministry of Education, I'd like to notify the public that all schools will be closed on Election Day, Thursday, January 9th, 2020, and classes will resume as of normal on Friday, January 10th, 2020. I've hoped to inform you sufficiently, and that'll be all for today for me.
Thank you, Minister Edion, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Sylveria Jacobs, to address you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Good morning, Minister. Good morning to the members of the media here present, as well as the staff of the various ministries. Good morning, St. Martin. It is a great opportunity for us to be here, the first press briefing for 2020. And I would like to say a very happy, blessed, and prosperous new year to all of us. We are definitely, as Minister said, in the beginning of a new decade. Decades usually signal a start. We have already had our mini start here on November 19th. January 9th will be another start. So I urge, on that note, all on January 9th to go out and vote. As the Minister of General Affairs, Civil Registry falls within my purview. And if you've been following the announcements but have missed this one, please take it from my person that the Civil Registry Department has announced that there are several, 1,420 undelivered voting cards that have been returned from postal services. This happens when the post person does not find the person on the registration card at the address that is listed. So if you have not updated your civil registry documents, then it would have gone to your last mailing address and the one that was on record when the voting registry closed in October. So if you have not to date received your voting card, please come to the civil registry right here in the government building on Pawn Island. That was open since the 2nd of January and the 3rd. Also on Saturday, you had that opportunity. But this week now will be your last opportunity. Everyone collecting his or her voting card should find their way to the government building. You will be able to receive not just your voting card, but also an ID card if you're missing that during the regular working hours, but definitely up until 6 p.m. on voting day. That's on the 9th. You can still collect voting cards at the polling, let me repeat that. You can still collect voting cards at civil registry, that is downstairs on the right at the government building on voting day from 8 to 6. So from today until Wednesday, it's from 8:30 to 7. And on voting day, it's from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So you have ample opportunity to come. And if you wait until the last moment, then of course you will expect to meet lines and then a line to vote as well. So I would urge all to have this handled before Election Day, January 9, 2020. The minister has already informed about the closure of schools, and I actually wanted to get a document pertaining to the time off, but according to the legislation, as has been the norm, you have 2 hours to vote. All business persons are urged to give their employees that time. Some coincided with their lunch to be able to have a longer period of time. You either go very, very early before you go to work. Do not wait until the last moment. The polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Several weeks ago, I have made announcements, and people continue to ask these questions. Even when I have my Prime Minister talks, they're asking about the vacancies that I have mentioned. The challenge that we have had in government has been that the process to hire has taken very long. I've heard also from persons, I have applied, Ms. Jacobs, and I haven't heard an answer. So that has been addressed with the department, and we are looking at ensuring that all those get responses. Particularly in the Ministry of General Affairs, there are vacancies in the ICT department that are very, very critical, as well as legal affairs. As you know, legal affairs department serves the entire government apparatus, and therefore, if we want legislation to move, we should be able to move forward with that. I've also taken note that security guards are needed, section head, and a senior worker in facility services, and I believe the process for at least one of those functions did start already. So those of you who wanted to know, those are the ones that I know offhand and that I've received from the ministry. And within the other ministries, of course, those ministers would be better able to tell you where those vacancies, critical vacancies that have budget for them, are in the system. It is very, very important that we get these things in place, and I look forward, therefore, to processing these. I have been having several meetings over the past week with the Ministry of General Affairs department heads to ascertain what the problems are, and as per usual, it's being reiterated that one of the main challenges is personnel. I am noticing also that we have to minimize overlap of work, not just within ministries, but across ministries. So ministries, several ministries working probably on in a same area or related area, but not collaborating enough. This is one of the goals that we have, and I hope to realize even in a short time that we are here, that we can get ministries and departments that are working on the same improvement trajectory, that they collaborate in terms of being able to carry it out in an efficient and effective manner. So with that being said, those are my short announcements for the opening remarks, and I wait any questions that would come from the media present.
We now move on to the question and answer session. Stephen Cirillion of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Minister, Prime Minister, morning. My question is for the Prime Minister. As it pertains to the collection of voting cards, approximately how many persons are yet to collect their voting cards? And B, did you make any requests for election observers?
Thank you for that question, Stephen. In terms of the voting cards, the update I have is from what was returned from the post office. So I haven't been updated as yet how many were collected before the weekend or on Monday, etc. So as soon as I have that update, I will definitely put that out in the media. But up until now, the last numbers are what were returned from the post office, the 1420. Of course, collections have been happening over Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and continuing Monday and so forth. So I expect that they should all be collected by Election Day. And the second part of the question related to election observers, the Central Voting Bureau had been keeping me updated in the person of the chairman, Mr. Jason Rogers, in that they have, as voting bureaus within the kingdom, agreed among each other and signed an MOU or a protocol that they would observe each other's elections. So he has made arrangements within the kingdom for that. What has come forth is that the Dutch kingdom, voting bureau professionals declined the invitation, but and I'm still waiting for the update as to whether Curacao and Aruba are still coming. There are also Caribbean counterparts, not in the kingdom, that have been invited, and I will confirm which ones will be arriving when the time comes. We as government did not request assistance, and any observers, and any observers that were quote unquote offered did not come directly from government to government, but via the Parliament of the Netherlands, and that's not usually the entity that we make agreements with. If I'm hoping that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Dimitri Whitfield of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Hi, so good morning, everyone. Good morning, Samantha and the ministers present. My first question is to Prime Minister Sylveria Jacobs, or actually it can be answered by either one. When this government took office, the interim government, a total of 5 agreements to finance PGIA's reconstruction were to be signed. How many have been signed to date? Which ones are outstanding, and what's the timeline to sign these agreements?
Thank you for that question, Dimitri. All the agreements that had to be signed by this government and by the airport with the EIB have been signed. Certain conditions, and World Bank, of course, we as government had to sign with the World Bank and the airport signed with EIB on its own. All the agreements were signed. However, certain conditions pertaining to corporate governance obligations that the airport had to meet still have to be finalized in order for the total transfer or availability to be at their fingertips. So all of the agreements have been signed.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the second round of questions. Stephen, you have the floor.
Thank you. My question is for the Minister of Finance. The 2020 draft budget was supposed to have been presented to Parliament. This is yet to take place. Do you have any knowledge as to how soon this will be presented?
Thank you for your question. Currently, right now, well, same thing. We are working on the budget right now, actually. The cuts were sent in a little late, and we are still over the budget that finance requested. So we are busy currently cutting the budget down still, and right after this press briefing, I'll be in a meeting with the SG discussing the budget again. So hopefully by next week we can have something presented. But because of the cuts not being made, we have to now cut ourselves.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Would allow a follow-up from Mrs. Cerulean.
Can you tell us as to how much is needed to be cut from the budget?
The last figure I had, so I don't want to assume anymore because it's still in process. The last figure I had, I believe it was about 10 million guilders.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Dimitri, you have the floor.
My second question is a follow-up to the first. Prime Minister, you said that certain conditions have to be made for all of the money to be at the fingertips, at the airport's fingertips. How much money exactly is at the airport's fingertips right now? And can you elaborate on some of the conditions, as especially the corporate governance?
Okay, based on the agreements that we signed with the World Bank, the funding comes via us. I will allow the Minister of Finance to add on to what I'm going to say, because as Minister of Finance, he has, I guess, a better understanding or remembrance of I don't have that documentation in front of me. He will be able to fill in wherever I miss out. But basically, we signed the agreement for basically the facility, which was on top of the 50 million that the Dutch provided to the St. Martin government to loan to the airport. That can be transferred, plus the facility, the extra. So that is available after we had made our signatures on that document. With the EIB and with the bondholders, I believe the bondholders have required some other corporate governance requirements as well. I received an email from the CEO yesterday, but I do not have access to that mail here to be able to bring the details of that in. But know that the airport had the CFO position. That is part of the whole corporate governance thing that the Schiphol Group provided. That person has been appointed, as far as I know. The holding board person is going through the process. So those are some of the corporate governance things. So all of the members of the board have to go through the screening process, and all of their documentation has been submitted. So that goes through a process of several weeks. Once that is finalized, then they can move on to the next step. Then they would have realized all of the requirements. Minister can add.
Minister Edion.
The airport, the agreements we signed allowed the airport to access the insurance proceeds. So not that the airport is not going to access the funds immediately. What happened initially was meeting the conditions will allow the bondholders now to release the insurance proceeds, which the airport used already. I even understood that even the bonuses were paid to employees of the airport for 2018. Part of the conditions are that the CFO has to be appointed, which hasn't taken place as yet. The contract is ready. I understood that the CEO is right now in the Netherlands, meeting with the Schiphol Group to finalize the agreement to loan basically the CFO out to PGIA, and after we meet all these conditions, then we can start a process of having the World Bank funds transferred to the airport based on where they're at in the planning and the construction.
Thank you, Minister Edion. I will allow a follow-up from Dimitri.
What is the exact concrete figure of money available? Because you said the insurance proceeds. What's the exact figure?
I believe it was about 75 million that was held up by the bondholders.
Thank you, Minister Edion. We now move on to the third round of questions. Stephen, you have the floor.
Mr. Finance, the lack of a president of the central bank was a point of discussion in Caruso between you and the finance minister last year. What's the situation with that? We know that, well, the former chairman of president of the central bank departed as per December 31st.
Yes, so we are currently on the hunt for a president of the central bank. In the meantime, Ms. Matros and Mr. Khardim have now taken up the position as management in the meantime, while we look for the president in the meantime. So we will continue now with the status quo of Ms. Matros. She will now be basically the acting interim director and Khardim together, they formed a new management team.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Dimitri, you have the floor.
Hi, my third question is to the Minister of General Affairs. In the last month, the fire department was supposed to move. The offices have already moved to the government building. I am aware, I understand. Where has the actual personnel and the fire trucks moved to, if they have moved?
I thought that had been divulged already. The firefighters and trucks are located at the Butte Hotel in the interim, while the management is here on the ground floor. What I would like to add, which I'd actually forgotten to, so I'm happy you asked that question, is that the construction or the reconstruction, the fixing has commenced as promised on the 2nd or 3rd of January. All the material is on board and they're scheduled to actually meet the deadline as had been set forth, which was something that even with the crisis ongoing was in the planning and planned to start in January. So I'm very happy that I've been assured by the fire chief that they're able to respond to calls as per usual, and we are moving forward with the necessary fixing that needed to be done, and hopefully that will be concluded in the time slot that was planned. So that is ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the final round of questions. Stephen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. My final question is for the Prime Minister. In the absence of the Minister of Rami, Prime Minister, the post office and the old administration building, I've been asking about those two entities for quite some time now. Some declare that the old administration building is an eyesore. What's been done? Do you have any knowledge as to what's been done to at least correct the situation as is?
Sorry, thank you, Stephen. I understand, even as a member of parliament and having to actually park there and walk to parliament from that area, it is really derelict. It's an eyesore for sure. And I would have loved to have come over here and the following day have it demolished. However, things don't go as quickly as we would like. It is definitely a priority of this government. I don't have the details as to when it will take place, but I will definitely have this question answered in more detail in collaboration with the Ministry of Rami. The post office building, similarly, no final decision as to the time, no permit for demolition has as yet been requested, and I can also segue into a rumor that I've been hearing out there pertaining to the library that government decided something where that is concerned. That is definitely not the case. No advice has come to the Council of Ministers for the demolition of the library at this time. If the library has done something on its own, then that is a question for the library, but we as government have not taken any decision as it pertains to the demolition of the library, which we know has to take place. However, that has not come through to the government, nor the desk of the Minister of Rami at this time. But most definitely, to reiterate, it has our priority to deal with that area. There is a lot that can be done in the interim, whether something else is built or not. We were looking as an incoming government at providing even more parking spaces in the interim, while plans are made for the areas in front where the government building is right now and where the post office is, as we know that proper parking and lighting, etc., is also an area within that space.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Dimitri, you have the final question.
My final question is for Finance Minister Irion. The previous Finance Minister, Perry Herlings, said that the cost of elections would be around 400,000 guilders. Can you state what is the projected cost of the elections if 400,000 guilders is correct, or if it's more or less?
I believe he stated the budget. There's a budget amount of 4,000 guilders, for the elections, and I will have to confirm how much we have spent so far. I don't have that on me right now, but I know the budget amount was 400,000 guilders, yes. So we have up until that amount to spend on the elections.
Thank you, Minister Edion, for your response. Prime Minister would like to add to that response as well.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Not necessarily add to that, but definitely we can ascertain from both civil registry and the main voting bureau, because it's an extra cost also to the government for the overtime. As I've mentioned, the times that people can come to the government building, and that has been going on since prior when they were given a provision for ID cards. So that will be ascertained. It will definitely cost us in personnel and the extra cost for overtime. As such, I didn't mention it just now. The Public Service Center over the hill is not open so that the personnel from there can assist with the preparations for election. There is the preparation of the ballots. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in order to prepare for an election, and so therefore all hands are needed on this side over these 3 days, and therefore you won't see that side of the option isn't there to get your services as you would normally get at the Public Service Center in Simpson Bay. And to reiterate, on the day of election, to be able to cast your vote, you will need to be present in person at the correct polling station. Another thing that has taken place is that because of the amount of persons within a voting district, if it goes over 1,500, it is reshuffled. So you have to check your card, because you may not be voting where you voted the last time. So check carefully on your card to see what voting district you are actually supposed to be at. Many people arrive at their old polling station, and then after having stood in a line, you know, like you're not on our list, because each polling station will only have the cards and the names of the persons who are destined to vote there. So we did sign off on the change that had to happen to reassign polling districts, and that was also made clear during previous press statements by the main voting bureau. So please check your voting card to see where it is you have to be to vote. If you still do not have a valid ID, you still have that opportunity. You can use a national ID card or a driver's license or a valid passport. These all have to be valid documents, and your voting card, of course. So be present, your voting card, and a national ID, either ID, driver's license, or passport, and at the correct polling station. And you have on that day up until 6 p.m. to be able to collect any of those 2 items that you require to have on your person to be able to cast that most valid vote that we need in order to determine a safe future for this country for the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, January 8th, 2020. For rebroadcast, tune in at 7 p.m. on St. Martin Cable TV and via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication, I'm Rolika Roach, and wishing you a pleasant day further.